"Mommy needs your help." The desperate voice of a child exploded from the phone, trembling, broken, full of fear. Ethan Cole froze where he stood. He was in the middle of a board meeting, floor-to-ceiling glass behind him, the skyline burning orange with morning light. But that voice, it didn't belong in this world of cold suits and money. It was raw, real, and it hit him straight in the heart. On the other end of the line, a little girl tried to stop her voice from shaking. Her name was Lily, 8 years old. Her pink shit was damp with tears. Her small fingers clutched the silver phone so tight her knuckles turned white. In the background, a faint beeping sound echoed, the rhythm of a heart monitor, slow and uneven. "Please," she whispered. "Mommy won't wake up. You have to come." Her words hung in the air, fragile and desperate, before dissolving into silence. Ethan turned away from his shocked executives. He didn't remember saying anything, only the sudden pounding of his heartbeat in his ears. "Who is this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. But the line went dead, static, then nothing. He stood there for a moment, staring at his reflection in the glass. Behind that calm, perfect face was a storm, confusion, dread, and something else, something that felt like guilt. Half an hour later, the doors of St. Vincent Hospital swung open. Ethan stepped inside, the click of his shoes sharp against the tile floor. The smell of antiseptic stung his nose. He wasn't sure why he'd come, only that he had to. And when he pushed open the door to room 213, everything stopped. The girl from the call was there, Lily, her small hand gripping her mother's pale fingers. Her tear-streaked face lifted slowly, eyes wide and wet. "You came," she whispered. On the bed lay her mother, Anna. Her face was familiar, too familiar. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had met her once, years ago, a single night that neither of them had spoken about since. He'd tried to bury that memory beneath work, money, and silence. But now here she was, fragile, still, fighting for life. The monitor beeped again, then flatlined. Lily screamed, "Mommy!" Nurses rushed in, alarms wailed, and Ethan's world collapsed around him. That was the moment he realized this Paul wasn't an accident. It was fate.
Years before that hospital call, Ethan Cole was a man with everything: money, respect, and a heart carefully locked away. He'd built his empire from nothing, the kind of success people whispered about but never understood. Behind closed doors, though, he lived alone in silence. No laughter, no family. Just the hum of city lights bleeding through his penthouse windows. Then came that night, the charity gala, the one he never forgot, no matter how hard he tried. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and gold. Women in silk gowns floated past men in black suits, laughter spilling like champagne. Ethan stood near the edge of the crowd, bored, detached, nursing a drink he didn't want. And that's when he saw her, Anna, a woman with kind eyes and a worn-out smile. She wasn't like the others. Her dress was simple, pale blue, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like she didn't belong there, and maybe that's why she caught his attention. Their eyes met for only a moment, long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. Later that night, after the music faded and the guests had gone, they found themselves on the hotel rooftop, strangers talking like old friends. She told him she worked 2 jobs to pay for nursing school. He told her nothing about himself. He liked how she didn't seem to care who he was. The night turned quiet, the air heavy with things neither dared to say. And then, under the glow of city lights, one impulsive decision changed everything. The next morning she was gone. Just a note on the pillow. "Thank you for listening. Please, forget me." He'd read it a dozen times before tearing it in half. And he did forget, or thought he did, until now, until that phone call. until the face of that unconscious woman in the hospital bed ripped open a wound he thought had long healed. Ethan stood by Anna's bedside that night, long after the doctors left. Lily had fallen asleep in the chair beside her mother, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The soft hospital lights flickered, casting faint shadows across Anna's still face. He whispered, "You should have told me." His voice cracked, the words barely a breath. And though she couldn't hear him, it felt like she did. Because just then, her hand twitched, the faintest movement, as if her body still recognized the sound of the man she had once loved and left behind.
The hospital lights buzzed faintly above, humming like distant thunder. Ethan hadn't moved in hours. He sat in that stiff plastic chair, elbows on his knees, watching the steady rhythm of Anna's heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound was a reminder. She was still here, but barely. Across from him, Lily stirred awake, rubbing her tired eyes. Her voice was soft, barely a whisper. "Are you Mommy's friend?" Ethan looked up, startled. Friend. The word hit him harder than it should have. He swallowed, unsure how to answer. "Yeah," he said finally. "Something like that." Lily nodded, her little face streaked with dried tears. "She talks about you," she said. His breath caught. "She does?" The girl nodded again, clutching the worn-out bunny in her arms. "She says you were the man who helped her once, a long time ago, before I was born." His chest tightened. "Do you know where your dad is?" he asked gently. She looked down. "Mommy says he's busy, but I think she just doesn't want me to be sad." The innocence in her voice shattered him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time noticed the shape of her eyes, the same green as his own. That realization hit him like a wave. He turned away quickly, heart pounding, 1,000 thoughts crashing through his mind. Could it be? No, it couldn't. He barely knew Anna. But then again, the timing, her silence, the way she looked at him when he'd walked in, even unconscious, her body had flinched, like it remembered. He pressed a trembling hand to his face. The truth was there, staring him down, waiting for him to admit it. Lily wasn't just some stranger's child. She was his. Later that morning, a nurse walked in with a clipboard. "Sir, you might want to speak to the doctor. Ms. Hale's condition isn't stable." He stood up immediately. "What does that mean?" The nurse hesitated. "Her blood pressure's dropping. She may not have much time if her body doesn't respond to the treatment." He felt the floor tilt beneath him. The world blurred for a moment. The sound of Lily's small sobs, the beep of the monitor, the quiet chaos of a life slipping away. He had spent years building things that didn't matter, and now the only thing that did might be taken from him before he even got to say her name again. Ethan stepped outside the room, gripping the wall for balance. Rain began to fall against the hospital windows. Slow, steady, unforgiving. He stared out at the city, lights glowing faintly through the storm, and in the reflection of the glass, he saw a man he didn't recognize, one who had everything, yet nothing that truly mattered. He whispered to the empty hallway, "She's my daughter, isn't she, Anna?" The rain answered in silence, and from that silence a promise began to form. He would not lose them again. The morning after the storm, the world outside the hospital seemed quieter, the kind of quiet that follows chaos. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat near Anna's bed, his shirt wrinkled, his tie forgotten on the chair. Her breathing was shallow, but steady now. Doctors moved in and out, whispering, adjusting wires, checking numbers, but Ethan barely noticed. His eyes stayed locked on her face, pale, fragile, and yet somehow still fighting. He reached for her hand, the same hand that once brushed his cheek under the city lights years ago. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. His voice cracked. He wasn't sure if he was angry, heartbroken, or both. A quiet knock came at the door. A woman in her mid-30s stepped in, carrying a small folder. "Mr. Cole?" He turned, blinking. "Yes. I'm Dr. Rivera, Anna's attending physician. We've stabilized her for now, but—" She hesitated. "Her body's weak. She's been under a lot of stress, emotionally and physically. She hasn't been eating properly. Not for months." Ethan frowned. Why would she do that to herself? Dr. Rivera sighed. "She's been trying to cover medical bills for her daughter, refused extra tests, said she couldn't afford them." Ethan's chest tightened. She shouldn't have had to. Dr. Rivera gave him a soft look. People do what they must for the ones they love. And with that, she left, leaving him to face the ache those words carved deep inside. Later that day, Ethan found an old handbag on the chair beside the bed. Anna's. He opened it carefully. Inside was a wallet, a few bills, and a folded piece of paper. When he unfolded it, he saw his own name written in the corner. Ethan Cole. His breath caught. It was an old photo from that night years ago, the charity gala. Someone had snapped it while they were laughing together on the rooftop, their faces lit by city lights. On the back, in faded ink, Anna had written, "For the night I felt seen." He traced the words with his thumb, his vision blurring. All these years, she'd kept it. He searched through the rest of the bag, finding an old notebook filled with messy handwriting. Inside, he read fragments, letters she'd never sent. "You deserve to know, but how do I tell you? You're too far away, too powerful. I'm nobody." Page after page, she'd written and crossed out the same sentence. Lily deserves her father. Ethan closed the notebook, his heart hammering. Every wall he'd built began to crumble. He realized she hadn't left out of pride. She'd left out of fear. As the sun dipped behind the city, the room was washed in gold and shadow. Ethan sat by her bed once more, the notebook clutched in his hands. Lily was asleep again, curled in her chair, her tiny hand resting on her mother's blanket. He looked at them both, the woman he once lost and the child he never knew he had, and whispered, "I should have found you sooner." Anna's eyelids fluttered, just barely, and her lips moved, too faint to hear, but Ethan leaned closer, and for a fleeting second he thought he heard her whisper his name. Ethan.
The world was still half asleep when Anna opened her eyes. The steady beep, beep of the heart monitor was the first thing she heard. The ceiling lights above her were soft, almost too bright. Her throat felt dry, her body heavy, her thoughts tangled between dreams and pain. She blinked, once, twice, and then she saw him. Ethan sat by the window, his jacket draped over the chair, his tie gone. He looked nothing like the man she remembered, the confident one who used to stride through crowded rooms with easy charm. This man looked tired, haunted. And when he realized she was awake, his expression broke into something raw, something between relief and guilt.
"Anna," he breathed, standing slowly. "You're awake." Her lips parted, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Ethan?" He moved closer, stopping by her bed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried every year they'd lost, every word they'd never said. Her fingers trembled as she tried to sit up, but pain flickered through her chest. He reached out instinctively. "Careful." She flinched slightly, not from pain, but from his touch. Years of distance lived in that single hesitation. "I didn't think you'd come," she said softly. "I didn't know," he replied, his voice breaking. "Not until she called." Anna's eyes moved to the small figure curled in the corner of the room, Lily, sleeping peacefully in a chair, wrapped in a hospital blanket. A fragile smile touched Anna's lips. "She called you?" Ethan nodded. "She said you wouldn't wake up. She sounded terrified." Anna's hand covered her mouth, her eyes welling. "Oh, my sweet girl." Ethan swallowed hard. "Anna, why didn't you tell me?" Her gaze dropped, her voice trembling. "You were building your empire, Ethan. I didn't fit into that world anymore." He took a slow breath, fighting the ache in his chest. "Don't you decide that for me." Anna looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the man beneath the suits and headlines. Not the millionaire, but the person she'd once loved. Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. I tried. I wrote to you. I wanted to tell you about her, but every time I did, I lost the courage. You were so far away, and I was so small." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes glassy. "You were never small." The room went quiet again. The hum of the machines filled the spaces between their words. Finally, Ethan spoke, softer this time. "She looks just like you." Anna smiled faintly. "But she has your eyes." And for the first time in years, they both laughed, not loudly, not freely, but enough for the walls to remember what warmth felt like. When Lily woke, the morning light spilled across her face. Her mother was awake now, smiling weakly. "Mommy!" she cried, rushing to her side. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Ethan watched silently, a lump in his throat. For a moment he was an outsider, a stranger peering into the life that could have been his all along. And yet, watching them, something in him shifted. Something long buried began to rise. The desire to protect, to make up for every lost year. Later that evening, when Anna had fallen back asleep, Ethan stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. Dr. Rivera entered quietly. "She's lucky," she said softly. "If you hadn't come when you did, it might have been too late." Ethan's voice was low. "She shouldn't have had to go through any of this alone." The doctor nodded. "Then don't let her anymore." As she left, Ethan turned back to the room. Anna and Lily lay together, hand in hand. For the first time in years, they looked at peace. He whispered, barely audible, "I'm not leaving again." The hospital felt quieter that night. Too quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the city outside hummed in a dull, distant rhythm. Ethan sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, staring at the sleeping faces of Anna and Lily. They looked peaceful, but peace never lasted long. Not for him, not for her. He remembered the last night he ever saw Anna, years ago, on a rain-slicked street behind a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and regret. She'd looked at him with those same soft eyes and said, "Promise me one thing. If you ever find happiness, don't come looking for me." And like a fool, he'd agreed. He thought she'd moved on. He thought she was fine. He never knew the truth hiding behind her silence. Now, watching her sleep beneath the weak hospital light, that old promise clawed its way back to the surface, jagged, ugly, unfinished. He whispered into the still air, "I broke it, Anna. I came back." The door creaked softly. A nurse stepped in, but it wasn't the usual one. This woman had dark hair, sharp eyes, and a name tag that read Clara. She smiled faintly, too faintly. "Mr. Reed, right?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. How's she doing?" Clara checked the monitor, her movements precise. "Stable for now, but you should know she's been here before." That caught him off guard. "Before? You mean recently?" Clara hesitated, her expression unreadable. "About 6 months ago. Same symptoms. Same room, actually." Ethan frowned. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" She shrugged, tapping the clipboard. "Family listed as none." Ethan's stomach tightened. "None? She never gave your name." For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the pale woman on the bed. He thought he knew her, every smile, every silence, but now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, Anna woke to the soft sound of rain hitting the window. Lily was coloring quietly beside her. Ethan was gone, but a fresh bouquet of lilies sat on the bedside table, along with a note in his handwriting. "I'll be back. There's something I need to find out." She pressed the note to her chest, her eyes welling with tears she didn't understand. Something in his words made her heart ache, not from fear, but from recognition. Because deep down, she knew exactly what he was looking for, and she wasn't sure she wanted him to find it. Across town, Ethan stood in front of a small, weathered building, an old clinic tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. A flickering sign read, "Dr. Ramirez, Family Medicine." He remembered the name. It was on one of the papers the nurse had handed him when Anna was admitted. Inside, the smell of antiseptic mixed with old paper. The receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for records, for Anna Reed or Anna Hale, about 6 months ago." She hesitated. "We don't usually release—" He placed a business card on the counter. "I'm her emergency contact now." Something in his tone silenced her. After a moment, she disappeared into the back, returning with a thin folder. Ethan flipped through the pages and froze. There were hospital notes, blood test results, and one handwritten line near the bottom in red ink. "Condition aggravated by emotional stress. History of threats. Recommend relocation." Ethan's pulse quickened. Threats? He flipped the page again, a small photo clipboarded to the file. It showed Anna and Lily in front of their apartment building, and behind them, half hidden in shadow, was a man he didn't recognize. Dark coat, sunglasses, watching. Ethan's jaw tightened. Whatever happened to Anna, it wasn't just illness, it was fear. He closed the folder slowly, his reflection faint in the glass window beside him. Then he whispered to himself, "I promised I wouldn't let her face anything alone again, not this time." As he walked out into the rain, the city lights blurred behind him. Every drop that hit the pavement felt like a countdown, a promise rekindled, and a ghost he was finally ready to confront.
The photo burned in Ethan's mind. That man, standing behind Anna and Lily, wasn't just a stranger. He had purpose in the way he stood.
Shoulders square, eyes hidden, watching. Not random, not passing by. Waiting. Ethan gripped the folder tighter as he walked down the rain-slicked street, each step echoing like a heartbeat against the empty pavement. Who was he? And why was he watching Anna? He ducked into a small cafe across from the clinic, the smell of burnt coffee and wet concrete filling the air. He pulled out his phone, zoomed in on the photo. A faint reflection, a sign in the glass door behind the man came into focus. Brookside Apartments. Ethan froze. That was where Anna used to live. The place she told him he left because it didn't feel safe anymore. He pocketed the photo, stood up, and whispered to himself, "Then that's where I'll start." Brookside was quiet, too quiet. Old bricks and chipped paint lined the building walls. Flickering streetlights painted everything in pale orange. Ethan's footsteps echoed through the corridor until he reached apartment 3B, Anna's old place. The door was padlocked, but through the small window he could see everything frozen in time. Boxes still stacked in the corner, a pink toy horse lying on the floor, and something else. A note taped to the fridge. He couldn't read it from here, but one word stood out in bold, angry strokes. "Stay away." Ethan stepped back, pulse racing. Who was the note for? Anna? Or whoever was watching her? Then from the shadows of the hallway, a voice said softly, "She told me someone would come looking." Ethan turned sharply. An old man stood near the stairwell, holding a broom, eyes tired but sharp. The janitor. Ethan approached carefully. "You knew her? Anna Hale?" The janitor nodded slowly. "Sweet woman. Always smiled at my dog. Moved out quick, though. Said she was being followed." "Followed?" Ethan repeated. The old man leaned closer, voice dropping. Tall guy. Always came by late. Never talked to anyone. Wore gloves, sunglasses. Watched the kid more than her." He paused. "She called the police once, but they didn't find anything. After that, she packed up in the middle of the night and left." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Did you ever see his face?" The man shook his head. "No, but he drove a black car, tinted windows, parked right across the street every night." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the hum of the flickering light above them. Then Ethan asked quietly, "Do you remember the plate number?" The janitor looked at him for a long time, then with a faint smile said, "Some memories don't fade, son." He scribbled something on a piece of cardboard and handed it over. Ethan sat in his car outside Brookside, rain streaking the windshield. He typed the plate number into a search database. A few seconds later, a name appeared on the screen. Victor Crane. Ethan whispered it out loud, like testing the sound of a ghost's name. The file said Victor was a private contractor, but the address and the company were blacked out. He scrolled further, only to find one more line at the bottom. Under investigation, unauthorized surveillance, 2020. Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just some stalker. It was something deeper. Professional, hidden, dangerous. He gripped the steering wheel, staring through the glass into the rain, and whispered, "What did you get yourself into, Anna?" Back at the hospital, Anna stirred awake. The heart monitor beeped softly beside her. Lily was asleep at her side, clutching her mother's hand. Anna turned her head and saw the empty chair where Ethan usually sat. Her throat tightened. He was gone. Again. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please don't do this," she whispered to the ceiling. "Don't make me lose you. Not again." But even as she said it, she felt it. The same fear that had followed her for years,
creeping back through the cracks of her fragile peace. She knew who Victor Crane was, and if Ethan had found his name, then the storm she'd been hiding from was about to find them both.
The clock on the hospital wall ticked past midnight. The hallways were quiet now, too quiet. Only the low hum of the fluorescent lights broke the silence. Anna stirred in her bed, the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. Lily slept beside her, curled up in the chair, her small hand still wrapped around her mother's hand. For the first time in days, there was peace. But peace is fragile, and in hospitals, it never lasts long. Outside, the elevator dinged softly. A tall man in a dark coat stepped out. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone who already knew where he was going. The receptionist looked up from her desk, but before she could speak, the man raised a hand. "I'm here for Anna Hale," he said quietly. His voice was calm, too calm. Ethan was miles away, sitting in his car on the side of an empty highway, staring at Victor Crane's file on his phone. He'd been running on fumes, anger, guilt, and fear all swirling together. The photo from Anna's apartment kept flashing in his mind. That shadowy figure behind the glass door. He hadn't noticed before, but now he could see the faint outline of a scar across the man's cheek, the same scar that Victor Crane had in his ID photo. He slammed his fist against the steering wheel. He had to get back to the hospital, now. He started the car, tires screeching against wet asphalt. The rain fell harder, blurring the road ahead. But the only image he could see was Anna's face, pale and frightened, and Lily's small voice whispering, "Mommy needs your help." Back at the hospital, the stranger in the dark coat entered Anna's room. The door creaked softly, but Anna didn't stir at first. Then, something in her mother's instinct awoke her. Her eyes opened. She froze. The man stepped closer, pulling the blinds shut behind him. "Hello, Anna," he said, his tone smooth, familiar. She tried to sit up, her heart pounding. "Victor!" He smiled faintly. "You remember." She reached for the call button, but he moved faster, pressing it out of her reach. "Don't," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." Anna's voice shook. "You already did." Victor sighed, glancing toward the sleeping child in the chair. "She looks like you," he said softly. "She shouldn't have had to see all this." Anna's breath caught in her throat. "What do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "To warn you." Ethan burst through the hospital doors, dripping with rain, his shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The night nurse looked startled as he rushed past the desk. "Sir, visiting hours are over." He didn't slow down. He sprinted down the hall, his heart racing, every light above him flickering as if urging him forward. When he reached Anna's room, he saw the door slightly open, and through the gap, a man standing beside her bed. Ethan pushed the door open. "Step away from her." Victor turned, the faintest smirk on his lips. "Ah," he said, "the hero arrives." Anna gasped, "Ethan, no!" But it was too late. Ethan charged forward, grabbing Victor by the collar. "Who are you?" he shouted. Victor didn't fight back. He just said, calm as ever,
You don't even know what she's hiding from you, do you? The words hit like a slap. Ethan froze. Anna's face went pale. Don't listen to him, she whispered. Victor smiled. Then tell him the truth. Silence. Only the steady beep of the heart monitor filled the air. Ethan's grip loosened. He looked at Anna. What truth? Her lips trembled. She turned her face away. Victor stepped back, straightening his coat. She thought she could outrun it, but you can't run from blood. He took one last look at the little girl sleeping beside the bed, and then whispered, "The past always finds you, Anna." And just like that, he walked out. No struggle, no fight, just the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, rain dripping from his hair. Anna finally met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw it. The fear, the guilt, the secret. "Ethan," she whispered, voice breaking. "There's something I never told you about Lily."
The rain hadn't stopped. Outside the hospital window, water streaked down the glass in trembling lines, distorting the city lights beyond. Inside, everything felt still, too still. Ethan stood at the foot of the hospital bed, his chest rising and falling like someone who'd forgotten how to breathe. Anna looked so small against the white sheets, her skin pale under the soft fluorescent glow. Lily was still asleep in the chair, her little hand clutching that worn stuffed rabbit, her silent comfort. Anna finally broke the silence. Her voice was thin, trembling. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you about Lily." He didn't speak, didn't move, just waited. Every second stretched longer than the last. Anna's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. "When we met that night, after the gala, I didn't know who you were. I didn't even know your full name. I just knew you were kind." She took a deep breath, her voice catching. "And then, when I found out I was pregnant, I tried to find you. I really did." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Then why didn't you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Because you weren't just Ethan. You were Ethan Cole, the CEO in every headline. You had a life I couldn't walk into with a baby in my arms." Her eyes flicked to Lily. "I thought it would ruin you." He laughed softly, but it wasn't joy. It was disbelief, pain. "You think any of this was ever about reputation?" He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "You should have told me." Anna turned away, unable to meet his eyes. "I wanted to protect her. From the world. From you." That last word hit him harder than he expected. "From me?" he repeated, his tone low, wounded. She nodded slowly. "Ethan, you were dangerous then. Ruthless. You would have done anything to control the narrative. I saw the stories. I saw what you did to people who crossed you." He stepped back, her words slicing deep. That part of him, the cold, calculating man who built an empire, was real. And she wasn't wrong to fear it. But still he whispered, "You had no right to take her from me." Anna's tears fell faster. I know," she said, her voice cracking. "Every day I wondered if I made the right choice. But she was all I had, Ethan. I couldn't let anyone use her to hurt us." Ethan sat down beside the bed, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then who was that man, Anna? The one who came here tonight? Victor Crane, what does he have to do with you? With Lily?" Her breathing grew shallow. She hesitated, as if the truth itself was poison. Then she whispered, "He was my boss. Years ago, when Lily was just a baby, he helped me get a job when I had nowhere to go." Ethan frowned. "And then," Anna's voice trembled, "he found out who Lily's father was. He started following us. Said he wanted something in return for keeping it quiet. Money, access, whatever he could get." She looked away, shame washing over her face. "I paid him every month for years. I thought it would end, but it never did." Ethan's jaw clenched. His voice turned to steel. "You let him blackmail you?" Anna nodded, her eyes full of regret. "I didn't have a choice. If I told you, he said he'd go to the media. He said you would hate me, that you'd take Lily away." The air in the room grew heavy. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky. Ethan stood there, silent, his fists trembling at his sides. He wanted to rage, to break something, anything. But instead he just looked at her. This woman who had lied to him, yes, but also the woman who had raised his daughter alone, who had sacrificed everything to keep her safe. He finally spoke, his voice quiet but unshakable. "He's not going to touch either of you again." Anna met his eyes, fear and relief colliding all at once. "Ethan, you don't understand who he works for. If you go after him—" But he cut her off. "I already did." And in that moment, she realized the ruthless man she once feared was the only one who could save them now.
The storm outside had turned violent. Lightning flashed across the skyline, illuminating the city in brief, electric bursts. Ethan's car tore through the rain-slicked streets, wipers struggling to keep up. The dashboard clock read 3:17 a.m. His jaw was tight. Anna's words replayed in his mind like a haunting refrain. "You don't understand who he works for." But Ethan did understand. He'd seen men like Victor Crane before, parasites who lived on fear. Only this time, the fear had a name, and her name was Lily. Victor Crane's office sat on the top floor of an abandoned commercial building on the edge of the city, quiet, forgotten, a perfect place for secrets. Ethan stepped out of the elevator, rain dripping from his coat, his shoes echoing against the polished concrete. The door ahead was cracked open, the faint orange glow of a desk lamp spilling through. "Come in, Mr. Cole," Victor's voice called, smooth, mocking, as if he'd been expecting him. Ethan pushed the door open. Victor sat behind a mahogany desk, his suit crisp, his smirk sharp. On the table between them, a small manila folder waited, thick, sealed, dangerous. "So," Victor began, swirling a glass of whiskey, "you finally came for your little family secret." Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at the folder. "What's in it?" Victor's grin widened. "Everything. The girl's birth certificate, photos, medical records, even the timeline that connects her to you. The press would love this story, don't you think?" Ethan took a step closer. "You've been bleeding her dry for years. It ends tonight." Victor chuckled, leaning back. "Don't pretend you're a hero, Ethan. You built your empire crushing people like her. You and we're the same." Ethan's voice turned cold. "The difference is, I still have something to lose."
The silence stretched thin. Then Victor reached into a drawer. A flash of metal. A gun. Ethan froze. Victor smirked. "See? That's the thing about men like you. You think money solves everything. But fear?"
He raised the gun. "Fear is much more reliable." But before he could pull the trigger, a soft voice broke through the static of tension. "Stop!" Victor turned. Anna stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, her hospital wristband still on her arm. Her eyes burned with fury and fear. "Let him go, Victor," she said. "You want me. You always wanted me." Ethan's chest tightened. "Anna, no!" But Victor's grin turned dark. "Well," he said softly, "this is poetic." He turned the gun toward her. "Back where it all began." The next few seconds were chaos. Ethan lunged forward. A single shot rang out. The folder burst open, papers scattering through the air like white feathers. Anna fell. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, his heart slamming against his ribs. Blood bloomed through her hospital gown. "No, no, no, Anna, stay with me!" Victor staggered back, shocked as the door burst open, police lights flashing behind the rain. They had been tracking his numbers since Anna's call. Officers swarmed in, shouting orders. Victor dropped the gun, hands shaking, eyes wide. In an instant, he was on the floor, surrounded. But Ethan didn't see any of it. He was holding Anna, whispering her name over and over, his voice breaking. "You're going to be okay. You have to be. Lily needs you." Her lips trembled into a faint smile. She has you now," she whispered. Her hand brushed his cheek, then fell still. The heart monitor tone echoed in his memory, just like before. Only this time, it was final. Hours later, dawn broke over the city. The rain had stopped. Ethan sat in the waiting room, still soaked, his suit stained with blood. Lily slept beside him, curled up with her rabbit. A nurse walked by, pausing for a moment, as if she wanted to say something comforting, but she didn't. There were no words big enough for what he'd lost. Ethan looked at the rising sun through the glass. The light was soft, pale, forgiving. He thought of Anna's last words. "She has you now." For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Not the power, not the wealth, but the weight of being someone's father. And as Lily stirred beside him, whispering sleepily, "Daddy?" Ethan turned to her, his eyes filling with tears. He didn't need to speak. He just nodded and held her close. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come from saving the world. It comes from saving what's left of your heart. The world didn't end the night Anna died, but for Ethan, it felt like it did. The next morning, the city looked washed out, gray streets slick with rain, sunlight trying and failing to break through heavy clouds. He walked through the hospital corridors in silence, each step echoing like a ghost. Every face he passed blurred together. Nurses, orderlies, strangers. No one met his eyes. He paused at the door to room 312, Anna's room, now empty. Just a clean bed, fresh sheets, a faint smell of antiseptic. It was as if she'd never been there at all, but he could still feel her, in the air, in the quiet, in the way his chest tightened when Lily said "Nami" in her sleep. He placed a small pink flower on the windowsill, her favorite, then turned and walked out without looking back, because looking back hurt too much. Lily's world had changed overnight. She didn't cry much anymore, not the loud, desperate kind. Now her sadness lived quietly behind her eyes. She carried her rabbit everywhere, the white fur dirty and worn. Sometimes she'd look out the car window and whisper, "Do you think Mommy can see us?" Ethan's throat would tighten every time. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to believe it himself, but the words always got stuck, somewhere deep in his chest. They moved into a smaller house on the outskirts of the city. Away from the skyline, the traffic, the noise. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. The kind of place where grief could breathe without being seen. Lily's laughter slowly started returning, piece by piece. A giggle when the rain hit her face. A smile when she saw the neighbor's cat. Little things. Tiny, fragile signs of healing. Ethan watched her and wondered if children healed faster because their hearts were still soft, while his felt like stone.
Late one night, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen. The house was dark, except for the glow of the refrigerator light. He stared at a drawing taped to the wall. Lily's. A stick-figure family. Mommy, Daddy, and her. All smiling, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. It had been weeks since the funeral. The board at his company was calling nonstop, demanding he return. But every time he picked up the phone, he just couldn't. He'd spent his whole life chasing success, meetings, contracts, investors. Now, none of it mattered. The empire he'd built suddenly felt hollow. He traded all just to hear Anna's laugh again. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. She forgave you, Ethan. Don't waste it. No name, no signature. But he knew who it was. Detective Hayes, the man who'd found Anna's final letter. Ethan stared at the message for a long time, the words echoing in his mind. Forgave him? For what? For not saving her? For not being there when it mattered most? He didn't know, but somehow it felt like permission to keep going. Morning sunlight poured through Lily's window the next day, soft and golden. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, coloring. When Ethan walked in, she looked up and smiled. "Daddy, look!" she said, holding up a new drawing. This time, there were only two figures, her and him. But behind them, drawn in soft crayon lines, was a faint angel with long yellow hair. "That's Mommy," she whispered. "She's watching." Ethan's voice caught in his throat. He sat beside her, his eyes stinging. "Yeah, I think she is," he said softly. They sat together in silence, sunlight on their faces, crayon dust on their hands, and for the first time since that awful night, Ethan felt something break open inside him. Not pain, not guilt, something else. Peace. That evening, he drove Lily to the pier. The ocean was calm, the sky painted in hues of orange and violet. They stood at the railing, wind brushing their faces. "Mommy liked the ocean," Lily said. "She says it makes her feel small but safe." Ethan smiled faintly. She was right. She opened her hand. Inside was a folded piece of paper, her newest drawing. She kissed it gently, then tossed it into the water. The paper floated, turning slowly, before the tide carried it away. "What did you draw this time?" Ethan asked quietly. "A family," she said. "But this time, we're all smiling." He knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, and as the last light of day faded into night, Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe that's what healing looks like." And for the first time, he believed it. Late one night, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen. The house was dark, except for the glow of the refrigerator light. He stared at a drawing taped to the wall. Lily's. A stick-figure family, Mommy, Daddy, and her, all smiling, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. It had been weeks since the funeral. The board at his company was calling nonstop, demanding he return. But every time he picked up the phone, he just couldn't. He'd spent his whole life chasing success, meetings, contracts, investors. Now, none of it mattered. The empire he'd built suddenly felt hollow. He traded all just to hear Anna's laugh again. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "She forgave you, Ethan. Don't waste it." No name, no signature. But he knew who it was. Detective Hayes, the man who'd found Anna's final letter. Ethan stared at the message for a long time, the words echoing in his mind. Forgave him? For what? For not saving her? For not being there when it mattered most? He didn't know, but somehow it felt like permission to keep going. Morning sunlight poured through Lily's window the next day, soft and golden. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, coloring. When Ethan walked in, she looked up and smiled. "Daddy, look!" she said, holding up a new drawing. This time, there were only two figures, her and him. But behind them, drawn in soft crayon lines, was a faint angel with long yellow hair. "That's Mommy," she whispered. "She's watching." Ethan's voice caught in his throat. He sat beside her, his eyes stinging. "Yeah, I think she is," he said softly. They sat together in silence, sunlight on their faces, crayon dust on their hands, and for the first time since that awful night, Ethan felt something break open inside him. Not pain, not guilt, something else. Peace. That evening, he drove Lily to the pier. The ocean was calm, the sky painted in hues of orange and violet. They stood at the railing, wind brushing their faces. "Mommy liked the ocean," Lily said. "She says it makes her feel small but safe." Ethan smiled faintly. She was right. She opened her hand. Inside was a folded piece of paper, her newest drawing. She kissed it gently, then tossed it into the water. The paper floated, turning slowly, before the tide carried it away. "What did you draw this time?" Ethan asked quietly. "A family," she said. "But this time, we're all smiling." He knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. And as the last light of day faded into night, Ethan whispered, almost to himself, "Maybe that's what healing looks like." And for the first time, he believed it.
It had been 2 months since the funeral, but the house still felt like she'd only stepped out for a moment. Her mug still on the counter, her favorite sweater draped over the couch, her perfume faint in the hallway. Ethan hadn't touched any of it. The evenings were the hardest. That's when silence settled in, heavy, unmoving. Lily would be asleep, and the house would hum with quiet memories. That night, a storm rolled in. Rain pounded against the windows. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the photo on the wall, the three of them, smiling at a carnival last summer. Ethan sat at the dining table, papers scattered in front of him. Bills, medical reports, old voicemails from doctors he'd never called back. He ran his hands over his face, exhaustion heavy in his bones. And that's when he saw it. An envelope, tucked behind a photo frame, his name written on it in Anna's handwriting. Soft, curved, familiar. His breath caught. He stared at it for a long moment before reaching out with shaking fingers. The paper was worn, like it had been touched many times before she hid it. He opened it slowly.
and began to read. Ethan, if you're reading this, I guess I couldn't say goodbye in person. Maybe I was too afraid you wouldn't come. There are things you never knew, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you, to protect us. Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes tracing every letter. Her voice echoed in his head as he read on. When we met, I was already sick. I just didn't know how bad it would get. You had your company, your dreams. I didn't want to be another responsibility you resented later. So I walked away before you could ever see me like this. His vision blurred. He could barely read the next line through his tears. But you gave me something I never thought I'd have. Lily. The best part of both of us. She's strong, Ethan, but she'll need you. Not the man who runs companies. The man who once held me like I was the only thing keeping him alive. Lightning flashed again, throwing the room into a sharp, white glow. He pressed the letter to his chest, his breath breaking. Don't hate yourself for what you couldn't change. Just love her enough for both of us. And when she asks about me, tell her I wasn't afraid. I just wanted her to have a life full of mornings you never miss. The last line was smudged. Maybe from her tears, maybe from his. Always, Anna.
The sound of thunder rolled through the sky as Ethan sat frozen. The letter trembled in his hands. He thought he'd run out of tears weeks ago. He was wrong. Every word she wrote felt like a hand reaching out from the past, gentle, forgiving, warm. She'd never blamed him, not once. All this time he'd been drowning in guilt, but she'd already let go. He leaned back in the chair, closing his eyes, clutching the letter tightly. And for the first time in months, he let himself cry. Not out of regret, but out of love. Pure, aching, human love. When the storm finally eased, the air felt lighter. The kind of calm that comes after everything has already broken. He folded the letter carefully, tucking it into his pocket. He didn't need to keep reading it. The words had already carved themselves into his heart. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Lily was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons. She looked up as Ethan entered. "Daddy," she said, holding up a drawing, "it's Mommy again." He smiled softly, kneeling beside her. This one was different. It wasn't sad. Anna was drawn in the sky this time, smiling down at them. And next to her, written in big, uneven letters, was one word: peace. Ethan swallowed, then handed Lily something folded. This was from her. Lily's eyes widened. A letter? He nodded. Yeah. She wanted you to know she loves you, and that she's watching over us. Lily took it with both hands, holding it against her chest like it was made of gold. "Then she's not really gone," she whispered. "No," Ethan said softly, pulling her into his arms. "She never was." That night, Ethan walked to the ocean again. The waves were gentle, lapping against the sand. He unfolded the letter one last time, the moonlight glinting off the ink. He read the final line again, "Just love her enough for both of us." Then he smiled. A small, quiet smile that felt like forgiveness. He tore the letter in half, letting the pieces drift into the tide. The ocean took them, like a promise carried away. And as he turned back toward the lights of the house, he whispered, "Good night, Anna." Behind him,
The waves kept moving, endless, steady, eternal. Just like love. The morning sun rose softly over the cliffs. Golden light spilled through the curtains, bathing the small living room in warmth. For the first time in months, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt alive. Ethan stood by the window, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He was staring at Lily, still asleep on the couch, her blanket tangled around her tiny legs, her drawings scattered everywhere. He remembered Anna's last words in the letter. Just love her enough for both of us. And for once, he didn't feel crushed by them. He felt called. He walked to the bookshelf, dust settling over the spine of an old photo album. He opened it carefully. Their wedding, their first house, the day Lily was born, moments he'd locked away because they hurt too much. But this time, the ache was different. It was softer, like the edge of pain had worn down, leaving something tender behind. He whispered to himself, "I'll keep my promise, Anna. I swear I will." Later that morning, Ethan drove Lily to school, the same route he used to take before everything fell apart. Only this time, the radio was on, playing softly, a song Anna used to hum while cooking. Lily was quiet, staring out the window, clutching her backpack. Then she said suddenly, "Daddy, are you still sad?" Ethan glanced at her. Her eyes were wide and honest, too honest for her age. "I think," he said after a long pause, "I think I'm learning how to be okay again." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than he expected. "Mommy would be happy. You're smiling more now." That hit him. Simple, innocent, and true. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said quietly. She would. At the school gate, Lily turned to him and smiled before running off. That smile, it looked exactly like Anna's. And for the first time, instead of pain, it filled him with peace. Ethan didn't go to the office that day. He drove straight to the foundation building, the one he and Anna had dreamed of opening before she got sick. A place that would help children who had no one else. The sign outside was covered in dust. He brushed it clean with his hand, revealing the faded letters. The Hale Hope Center. He'd forgotten it was even there. Inside, the air was stale, the walls bare. But he could see it, the vision Anna once described to him, a bright space filled with laughter, books, and sunlight. A place where no child would feel alone like Lily had. He stood in the middle of the empty room, took a deep breath, and whispered, "It's time." That afternoon, he made the first call. To the city, the contractors, the donors. His voice was steady, determined. Every word he spoke felt like stitching together the pieces of a life he'd broken. He wasn't just doing it for Anna anymore. He was doing it for every promise he'd ever failed to keep. Weeks passed. The sound of hammers, paintbrushes, and laughter filled the once empty building. Ethan worked side by side with the volunteers, rolling paint, lifting boxes, wiping sweat from his brow. He wasn't Mr. Hale anymore. He was just Ethan, a man rebuilding from the ashes. Lily would visit after school, running through the halls with other kids, her laughter echoing off the walls. She was healing too, not because the pain was gone, but because love had found a way to grow through it.
One afternoon, she tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy," she said, "when the center opens, can we name the library after Mommy?" He smiled, his throat tight. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said softly. "We'll call it Anna's Corner." She grinned, a wide, shining smile that could have lit the whole room. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan laughed, really laughed. On the day the center opened, the sky was clear, the kind of blue that seemed endless. People gathered outside, cameras flashing, children running around with balloons. Ethan stood at the podium, his suit simple, his tie loose. He looked out at the crowd, then down at Lily holding his hand. "When my wife, Anna, was alive, she used to say one thing. Love is not something you say, it's something you build." He glanced up at the building behind him. "And today we're building that love, together." The crowd applauded softly, but Ethan wasn't looking at them. He was looking at the sky, whispering a quiet thank you. The wind brushed through the trees, warm and gentle, like an unseen touch. He swore he could almost hear her voice in it, calm, proud, free. And in that moment, Ethan finally understood. Grief wasn't about letting go. It was about holding on differently. He looked down at Lily, smiling. "I kept my promise," he whispered. And somewhere, carried on the wind, it felt like Anna whispered back, "I know."
The day came too soon. Rain again. Always rain when something important happened. Lily held onto Liam's hand as they watched the nurses wheel Grace away. She was small, too small, but she stood as tall as she could, trying to be brave. "Mommy will be okay, right?" she asked. Liam knelt down, forcing a smile. "Yes," he said, "because she has you, and you're the strongest girl I know." Lily nodded, but tears slipped anyway. When the doors closed behind her mother, she whispered to the empty hallway, "Please, come back." Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Liam paced the waiting room, phone buzzing in his pocket, calls from lawyers, former board members, people who still wanted something from him. He ignored them all. None of that mattered anymore. Only one thing did. The clock ticked. Rain tapped against the window. Then, the surgeon appeared. Liam froze. The man's face gave nothing away. She made it through the operation, but there were complications. We'll need to see how she responds in the next few hours. Lily gasped. "She's alive?" The doctor smiled softly. "Yes, sweetheart, she's alive." Liam exhaled, a sound halfway between a sob and a prayer. He pulled Lily close, holding her tight. They stood there, in the middle of that sterile hallway, wrapped in relief and exhaustion. Outside, the rain stopped, and the clouds began to break.
Morning sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and golden. The smell of pancakes drifted through the small kitchen, mixing with the faint hum of a radio playing an old song. Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs, drawing with her colored pencils. A big red heart filled the page. Inside it, she wrote 3 names. Mommy, Daddy, me. Ethan stood by the stove, flipping pancakes, something he never used to do. He wore an apron now, half-tied and dusted with flour. And for the first time in a long time, he was smiling without having to try. "Daddy," Lily said, looking up, "can we go to Mommy's garden today?" He nodded, a soft glimmer in his eyes. "Of course, sweetheart. I was thinking the same thing." The garden had become something sacred, a living memory of love. Nestled behind the Hale Hope Center, it overflowed with color. Roses, lilacs, sunflowers reaching toward the light. A plaque stood in the center. Anna's garden, where love never fades. Lily knelt by a patch of tulips, her small hands brushing the petals. Ethan stood a few steps back, holding a watering can, watching her quietly. She looked so much like Anna now, the same spark in her eyes, the same warmth in her smile. She'd love this, he said softly, almost to himself. Lily turned. Mommy does love it. She told me. Ethan smiled gently. Oh yeah? When did she tell you that? Lily pointed to her chest. Here. She tapped her heart, beaming proudly. I can feel her here. And for a moment Ethan couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat tight, the sunlight catching in his eyes.
That afternoon, they walked through the city together, hand in hand. It wasn't the same city it used to be. The noise didn't bother him anymore. The cold glass towers, the rushing people, somehow everything looked softer now. They stopped by a small bookstore near the corner cafe. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, waved at them. "Back again?" she asked. Ethan chuckled. Lily's already finished the last 2 books. She's relentless. Lily grinned, holding up a new story she'd chosen. The Girl Who Found the Light. Ethan smiled, paying for it, and as they stepped outside, he thought, maybe that was what they'd both done. That evening, the Hale Hope Center hosted its anniversary celebration. Hundreds of people came. Families, doctors, volunteers, strangers who'd found hope again. The lights glowed warm and golden. Ethan stood on the stage, looking out over the crowd. He took a deep breath and said, "Exactly 1 year ago today, this was just an empty building, and I was just a man trying to fix something I couldn't." He paused, emotion rising. But then a little girl reminded me that love doesn't end when someone's gone. It lives on in what we do for others. The audience was silent, hanging on every word. Lily stood beside him, holding his hand. He looked down at her and smiled. This center, this garden, this life, it's all because one woman believed in kindness strong enough to outlast her own time. He looked up, voice steady now. So if you're here tonight, if you're healing, if you're hurting, just know this. Love will always find you again. Sometimes not the way you expect, but always when you need it most. The crowd stood and applauded. Soft, genuine, grateful. And as the lights dimmed, Ethan looked up toward the balcony. And for just a heartbeat, he swore he saw her. Anna. Smiling. Peaceful. Then she was gone. But her presence stayed in the laughter, the music, the light. Later that night, back at home, Lily was asleep. The house was quiet except for the gentle ticking of the clock. Ethan stepped out onto the balcony, looking at the city lights below. He closed his eyes, breathing in the cool night air. It wasn't grief anymore. It was gratitude. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Anna, for showing me how to live again." The wind picked up, brushing against his face like a familiar touch, and somewhere inside, he knew she heard him. Ethan turned to go inside. He paused by Lily's door, smiled, and whispered, "We're home."